And let's start by looking at the first afternoon game on the slate, Washington football team versus the Arizona Cardinals. Last week, both of these teams with a surprise win, beating the spread against themselves in both of these games. Both of these teams are projected to start 0-1. Cardinals beat the 49ers. Washington beats the Eagles and, put on a pretty good showing defensively, whereas the Cardinals did their magic offensively. So this could be a very interesting showing. We're going to see which team is more for real here, whether Washington actually has a more dominant defense than we've been expecting up to this point, or is the Cardinals offense being led by Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins really that potent? So we'll find out. But in terms of what Vegas is expecting, they're expecting there to be some more points scored in this one. 46.5 over under, one of the higher ones on the week. Cardinals are projected to win by 6.5, giving us a spread of roughly 26-20 there for the Cardinals. Now, again, as we mentioned in our video yesterday, and we'll keep updating these points against totals as the season goes on, but with only one data point right now, it doesn't really mean too much for us. Obviously, with Washington having a pretty strong game against Carson Wentz last week, pretty much the only place that they gave up points was to the tight ends. Obviously, that was with Ertz and Goddard going off. So, that's a little bit ambiguous. We're not starting Dan Arnold because of that. And then the Cardinals gave up that massive play to Raheem Mostert, gave up a lot of running back points, but overall, they looked a little bit better against the run than we expected them, so we're not looking into these lines too much. What does matter more is just based on our preseason analysis, what we've seen in terms of the one game that we have, and trying to turn that into a narrative that makes sense. So looking at both of these teams here, I'm not expecting this game to go as high scoring as Vegas is saying right now. I didn't like what Washington did on offense really at all last week. The only reason that they were even in that game was because they kept forcing interceptions from Wentz pretty near the goal line, so they were able to have pretty short fields. Haskins started to look a little bit better as the game went on, but for the most part, the Washington football team was not very solid on offense. Now, the Cardinals defense probably is a little bit weaker than the Eagles, but I don't expect Washington to come out and light the world on fire. You're starting McLaurin. McLaurin still had a decent amount of targets and air yards in that game, and he has the potential to break out at any point. And then Logan Thomas, I believe he had the second most targets or team targets for a tight end across the NFL. So Logan Thomas has an interesting start here. George Kittle had an okay game last week, but the biggest reason there was the fact that he had that hyperextended knee pretty early on in the game before he was actually able to make any damage. And if we remember from last year, the Cardinals were very exploitable against the tight end position. So Logan Thomas is a very interesting tight end flex here, and someone that if you were able to pick him up off the waiver wire, if you own George Kittle and you're worried, that George Kittle won't go, which I would believe at this point, I would venture to guess that George Kittle won't play. Logan Thomas is a really nice bench stash you can keep on your team and pivot to in case Kittle gets declared out on Sunday morning. I think Thomas will have a pretty decent game here. Now, in terms of the rest of the options here, I still personally like Antonio Gibson in the backfield more than any other running back on this team. And if I had to start one, I would go with Gibson. He just looks far more explosive than any of the other guys there. The issue is obviously, is he going to get the goal line carries? Last week, obviously, Peyton Barber with the 2 goal line touchdowns there, but he didn't really add much with his touches at all. So I believe as this team becomes more, they trust Gibson with their touches more, Gibson will see more and more of the workload, and Barber and McKissic will be phased out a bit more, but that might take a few more weeks, so I'm not really looking to jam anyone else in my lineup here. Steven Sims, only 3 receptions last week, had a really nice stretch to end last year, but didn't really continue that. Not sure if it's really worth even mentioning him unless you're in like the deepest of deep leagues. Probably not even necessarily a guy you need to keep on your bench right now. And then the Washington defense, I'm not necessarily outright telling you to bench them. I do think that they're going to have a rougher time against Kyler Murray than they did last week against Carson Wentz. Kyler Murray is a bit more elusive, probably not going to be able to sack him as much. And then obviously having true offensive weapons like DeAndre Hopkins and Kenyan Drake and Christian Kirk, a bit stronger than what the Eagles were coming out with them last week with broken offensive line and no Miles Sanders. So while they'll still probably get a few sacks, I don't think they're going to be scoring as many points this week. So tentatively looking at them, but probably not. And then Haskins, is pretty much a no-go at this point unless you're in the deepest of 2 quarterback leagues. Peyton Barber is literally just a shot at another potential goal line touchdown. I'm not going to take that shot with Barber. So on the Cardinals side, this one is going to be one of the easier teams, at least for now. We'll see what happens with the splits between Kenyan Drake and Chase Edmonds, but Kenyan Drake still looked pretty good on the touches that he got. Hopefully he maintains enough of that workload, enough of those weighted opportunities to continue to be putting out decent scoring. I mean, a lot of people were upset with Kenyan Drake's output last week, but I mean, he still scored in like the top tier of running backs. He still had a touchdown, still had like 16, 17 PPR fantasy points. Like, I mean, that's all you can really expect sometimes. He played the 49ers, so I think Kenyan Drake is still a really good start this week, even against that tough offensive line for Washington because of the work he gets out of the passing game. Of course, you're going to start Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray looks like he could definitely be taking that year 2 leap like we saw from Lamar Jackson. And then DeAndre Hopkins, goodness, my 14 targets last week, absolutely insane amount of target share for this team. If he continues that, I mean, he's going to be in the running for the number 1 receiver on the year. So, of course, you're jamming Hopkins into your lineup, and I think the Cardinals defense is actually a sneaky play here. Dwayne Haskins looked bad last week, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals can sneak a few turnovers in this one, potentially get a few sacks on him. Now, the interesting plays come down to when we talk about like Chase Edmonds and Christian Kirk. Obviously, Chase Edmonds got the touchdown last week, but he didn't really get enough carries or targets out of the backfield to really warrant a flex start at this point yet. I'm not going to be pivoting over to Chase Edmonds until we see a little bit more. And then Christian Kirk, I mean, last week he was kind of a sacrificial lamb playing alongside the side where Richard Sherman was to keep Hopkins free, but I don't really know that they're going to be featuring Christian Kirk too much. If you're playing him, it's almost going to end up being more like a boom-bust shot every single week. And at this point, I'm going to wait and see until Christian Kirk has a good game before I jam him into my lineup. Probably not going to be starting Larry Fitzgerald or Dan Arnold anytime soon either. In terms of prediction, this one, I think the Cardinals will win this one pretty easily. I have them winning 21-13 in their home opener against the Washington football team.